This is the saint and the singer.
I'm the saint sometimes.
Oof. Maybe not tonight. And I'm the singer. Definitely not tonight. And we are doing a series on whatever it is we want to talk about when we show up Wednesday.
Yeah, we're really putting in the hard work to figure this out, aren't we?
Right.
But I think sometimes we do our best work just by improv.
By not working.
Yeah. We let we're letting the Holy Spirit come through us.
What is it we always say? I work best under pressure with deadlines, but right at the deadline.
Yeah. Actually, I usually work best when the deadline's already passed.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So last week we talked about Sabbath.
Yes.
And whether or not we're required to, and how to do, or how we do it, or is there a way it should be done?
The way of what is Sabbath.
Yeah. So how was your Sabbath?
Well, Sabbath was Father's Day. As a pastor, I work on Sundays. But I don't really see it as work. I see that as part of my worship time, and so I do find rest in that. But then we went to my in-laws, so I hung out with them. So no, that was my Sabbath. I didn't have to cook dinner. That was good.
Okay.
I kind of hung out and just sat around and talked. So
This is the point at which I would normally, which I'm not going to, inject a joke about how relaxing it must be to hang with your in-laws.
It's a good thing I love my in-laws.
But I'm not going to make that joke or even say anything about it.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh.
So how was your Sabbath?
News update.
Oh, yes.
We got to church and, well, no, you guys got to church. I found out about this much later. And our plumbing is not happy. The whole
Catastrophic.
church smells like a big ball of poop. And the plumber is somewhere around us making a lot of noise. So if you hear stuff in the background, it's maybe the church blowing up, or maybe it's just a guy fixing something, but I really hope he gets that one figured out.
Yeah, it's a pretty poopy situation.
Anyway,
Hey, I'm being honest, it really is.
no, man. If you guys only knew.
I've seen things, man. I've seen things. Ben was the funniest.
Wow.
Because Ben's like, there's reasons why I'm not a plumber.
Man.
This is the reason why I'm not a plumber.
Oof, duh.
And you should not put baby wipes in a children's toilet.
PSA.
Yes.
Don't do it.
It's not worth it.
No.
I've seen things.
Seems like a good idea at first, but it's not. My Sabbath was also Father's Day.
Yeah.
Weird. It's weird. Saturday night. I mean, Saturday we had a great day, right? I had to work, but then we also did some tree cutting down in and some swimming
there's
pool.
Fellowship in there.
So the start of our Sabbath, we were actually together having a meal with several of our good friends and family from church, and then went home from there and started the rest of it. But I too, as worship pastor, was here at church, which I think we established last week doesn't really feel like work, so that's not a problem.
Right.
And then I plopped myself down on the patio in a chair and watched my smoker work for a good 6 hours. So I did a few things other than that, but I spent the majority of that
worship,
time.
rest, delight.
Well, I did my worship early.
Oh, okay.
It was more stopping,
So you're stopping, okay.
maybe not resting so much, because, there's always the getting up and the spritzing and the wrapping and the playing with stuff.
Well, you rested for 15 minutes when you rested the meat.
Yeah. And I did rest the meat, and I rested it quite a bit more than 15 minutes. It was definitely delight. I hung out with my dog and sat on the back patio and just was very sort of manly, I guess.
Sounds good.
So it was a good Sabbath. It was way more of a Sabbath than the prior week. So,
Well, okay.
but this week we have just moved on to another one of the spiritual practices because we can't think of anything else to talk about right now. So we'll just logically move to the next one, I guess, which was
Are we going to move to it really fast?
we can move to something very fast,
Okay.
and that is fasting. And I'm not an expert on this whatsoever, so I'm not sure that anything that I have to say about this is going to be right, useful.
It might be what
helpful.
not to do.
Well, today would be a prime example. So, there, throughout history, my understanding is that the church has fasted pretty traditionally and pretty nonstop up until about the Depression. And then I guess the people in the Depression decided they'd had enough involuntary fasting, and so the church kind of got out of that rhythm. But before that, seems like the rhythm was basically Wednesday and Friday.
Okay.
And Wednesday is for basically the betrayal of Jesus, and Friday for Good Friday. And so from that perspective, fasting is sharing in the suffering of Christ. Okay. So that has been the schedule that I've been trying to keep with varying levels of degrees, right? Just like with Sabbath, you're going to have, especially if you're taking on something that you've just not done before, it's not going to be great all the time. So today was my day to fast.
How'd that go?
It went so well.
How long did you last?
No minutes, actually, because my calendar keeper has been with my daughter in Kansas City for the last 3 days. I woke up like yesterday. I was like, tomorrow's Wednesday. I'm going to do this. I'm feeling good about it. Woke up late. Stumbled downstairs, pulled some pork sausage out of the freezer, put some bread in the toaster, and went to town. And halfway through the first piece of sausage on toast with butter and jelly, I went, it's Wednesday. I'm fasting today. So I chalked that one up to I'm not fasting today. So I lasted no minutes.
I'll be honest with you. I couldn't even make it through the 30-hour famine in youth group without cheating.
Yeah,
We
I heard
snuck-
you stuffed stuff.
We
in your stash.
had snack cakes stuck in the towel dispensers at the church bathroom, in the men's room. I figured that our
Yes.
female sponsor couldn't follow us in there, and it was my friend's mom, and she wasn't gonna come check on us, so we'd go in there and eat like ho hos.
Boy, those guys really got to poop a lot.
Well, after all of those snack Debbie little snack, it might have been the case. I don't remember that, but yeah, I couldn't even go that. I mean, I am truly. This is something that I have to work on, and I have to make a conscious effort, and it's going to be hard for me because I will start to feel nauseous if I don't really eat. I can fast for breakfast, but it's not really a sacrifice. And so I have to go through. I'm gonna have to make an effort to skip lunch.
Well, one of the things I'm kind of working on is just working my way into that, right? Like I'm not doing like a 21-day fast or 3-day fast. What essentially it is I'm skipping 2 meals.
Okay.
So it's basically, if I were on some sort of real schedule, I would basically be 24 hours.
Your dinner to dinner.
So dinner to dinner. So I have found that to be easier than I thought it would be.
Okay.
Mainly because before I started, I went down a rabbit hole and listened to a bunch of podcasts and watched a bunch of stuff. Because I grew up in a tradition where if I were to tell anybody at my church that I was thinking about fasting, they would have called me some sort of hippie loser, or only you get some weird looks if somebody had said you were fasting. So it's just not something that I've ever been attuned to, never really felt necessary. So I'm trying it, and I don't know if it's
respect
something. I don't know if it's something that I'm going to do forever, or if it's something that I'm just building up some sort of muscle to where, if I felt I needed to do a 3-day fast, I could do it. And
Yep.
so for me, what I'm doing for most of the time, I wouldn't call super hardcore. It's just I'm learning more about it and learning how my body works. And, if it were to result in some pounds falling off of my body over time, that would not be the worst thing that ever happened either. I don't see any evidence of that yet. But, when my fast days are like today, there's really not going to be a whole lot of results.
Well, I fast, sometimes when I don't take my snack.
Yeah.
That's a real sacrifice.
Well, and it's like we talked last week about a Sabbath. I mean, start 2 hours, start 4 hours. So if you go 4 hours between meals, make it 6, make it 8, and then work yourself into it. Quite frankly, before I actually got serious about this, I was messing around with intermittent fasting some too.
Sure.
So it's basically just skipping breakfast. So it's been a progression. So what are your thoughts on fasting in general? Is that should we start with, is it commanded of us, or is it just something that is a wise practice to help us go deeper? But again, like, we're not going to show up to the pearly gates or whatever, imagine whatever scenario you will when it's time to meet Jesus, however that works. And he's going to be like, well, you did this, you did great with this, but phew, boy, you really sucked at fasting. Like, I'm not 100% sure that's ever going to be part of the conversation.
No, I think there are different schools of thought on fasting, and some of it kind of depends on which translation you follow too.
Yeah.
But I do believe that fasting is a spiritual discipline.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe that every spiritual discipline is a commandment. I believe a spiritual discipline, such as Sabbath, like we talked about last week, while it's not a command, it's a good practice. And I think fasting is a good practice. And I think I would say that the biggest reason why fasting is a good practice is because you are taking control of an appetite. In this case, it's the actual appetite of food.
Right.
But you can also, we abstain. We talk about in the church abstaining from sex until you're married. That is a form of fasting. And when you're in those moments where you're having those kinds of thoughts of a Big Mac or, a sexual thing, that's where you are taking control of that thought and turning it to the Lord. And I think that this is a way of practicing and putting into practice a way of overcoming your appetites.
And a lot of those appetites are so similar in many ways that once you could learn to master one, I think it would strengthen your ability to master
practice.
the other.
The same practice.
That's a great point. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. I mean, in the Bible, fasting usually is associated with fervent prayer. So if you think about Esther, for example, she's in a position where her whole people group is going to be destroyed if she doesn't go and speak with the king, which could also result in her life being ended because she interrupted the schedule, basically. So she calls on the remnant there of Israel to fast for 3 days and to pray for her before she approaches the king. I think there's a lot of indication that where prayer for something very important is involved, it seems like it's usually associated with fasting. So in modern day, we've separated those two, but I would think like a correlation would be if you're a family member or a church member has let's just say has cancer, and we're being called to pray for them, or we've got some really big decision to make as a church, we should call the congregation to pray and to fast.
Yeah.
And
We see that in Acts, actually, with
Yeah.
Paul and Barnabas.
yeah,
Before they send them out, they, the apostles pray and fast for a time for God's direction.
yeah. And I'm not saying we should try this, but at the very beginning of Jesus's ministry, the first thing he does is fast for 40 days. So, so you even have that example from our Savior. And there's some other references in the New Testament regarding fasting, and we can talk about some of those when we get into methods or whatever. But I'm coming to the opinion that it's helpful. I don't know in what way yet, and I don't know how long I'm going to do this until I figure that out. But there's more than one approach. So there's that approach, right?
Yeah.
There's that, and then the other approach that I am intrigued about some is fasting in order to empathize with the poor.
Okay.
So
That would be like your 30-hour famine.
30-hour famine type
If
stuff.
you were a youth group in the 90s, you know what I'm talking about.
Right. And early 2000s, we did it.
Did they still?
in our probably early to mid 2000s. One of the things I've heard that I'm very interested in that I have not started doing yet, because I'm still just trying to work out how it is I get through a 24-hour period without A, losing my mind, and B, giving into those appetites, is there's a lot of people who will fast 1 or 2 days a week, and during those days they will take the money that they would have spent on food that day and donate it to a charity that feeds the homeless. Mm-hmm. And so you are relating in a fairly direct way to the poor and the homeless in your community there locally. So you are sacrificing something in your life for other people who need it. I think that is a very compelling method and thought process that I'm not quite there yet, but kind of like I said last week, my goal for Sabbath is to work my way into turning my cell phone off for 24 hours. I think that's something I would like to work into for that practice in the intermediate term anyway, if I continue to do it. There's also, so we talked about prayer and fasting, relating to the poor, and then sharing in the suffering of Christ is another one. And that's kind of that's what my schedule is based on. Although I don't in any way think that what little suffering I have as a result of not eating a double cheeseburger today has to do with the suffering of Christ. But there's other ways to do that, which you and I have discussed, and I don't know that it's necessary to go through those details, but you can share in suffering of other people by praying for them. So one of the things I have done is on days when I'm fasting and the hunger pangs start to really kind of get intense, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I could just go get some cheese and crackers or something. I take that feeling of discomfort and I relate it to someone I know who's suffering, and then say, if they can suffer this loss, which they can't do anything about, then surely I can suffer this minor loss of something that I do have power over. And then during those times when I'm feeling that way, I pray for that person. So it does kind of affect other parts of my spiritual life, in that it causes me to empathize with the suffering and to pray for them in ways that maybe I wouldn't think about at, 2:15 in the afternoon while I'm at work. So that is another purpose of it that I see that can definitely strengthen one's faith life.
Well, and I would say another one that we see over and over again is there's a correlation between mourning and fasting.
Mourning and fasting. I knew there was another one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll use one example from Nehemiah. So Nehemiah is talking with some exiled Jews, and this is Nehemiah 1, 3, and 4. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. So basically, Jerusalem's identity and soul, sort of physical protection is destroyed. So it's open borders. And there's no border there to protect its autonomy. And he says this in verse 4. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And then also we see in Psalm 35, David doing the same for a friend of his that is sick. He's mourning this sick friend, and he goes into fasting for his friend. Again, there's that combination of prayer, but it's a specific prayer. So we see sometimes it's prayer for answers, for direction, how to move forward. But sometimes it's because we're mourning somebody or we're mourning a situation. And so we take and withhold ourselves that food as we're praying.
Would you say that at least in the Old Testament, it seems like it was thought of as a way to influence God's thinking as well? Because if you think about, so King David, after the whole Bathsheba and Uriah thing, he fasted there after the baby died, or as they thought, but boy, I lost my whole train of thought. As the baby was going to be born, he fasted, and then the baby shows up dead, and he quit fasting and moved on with his life. Mm-hmm. So is there some thought there that it was a means to influence God in some way, do you think?
I don't know if it was a way to influence God as so much as the way was to humble yourself before God.
Okay.
Because if my hunger pains, it's hard to have pride when my stomach is growling.
Okay.
It's hard to be. It's hard to be strong in body when you have no fuel in the tank.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a humbling component of that, and so I think when we see, Nehemiah and David and Esther doing this, it's a way of not so much trying to impact the Lord as is to align our mindset with you are God and I am not.
Okay. I can dig that.
I'm just saying that's kind of how I would go with it more so than anything. I don't think it's like a manipulation as it is an opportunity for us to place ourselves.
And I don't know where I was going with that. Manipulation sounds a little further than where I'm trying to go, but maybe not. I don't know. It's like it's almost like it's a way to show you that I'm serious about what I'm asking for, maybe. But that goes along with humility.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I can buy that. Let's take a quick break. Okay, we're back. We're going to talk about a few things now. Let's talk about how to fast and how not to fast.
Okay. How to fast.
How to fast. First, you don't eat food.
So how not to fast is to eat breakfast.
That is a very clear how not to fast. And then, once I had breakfast, I was like, well, might as well eat lunch and dinner too.
There's a sermon there also. You could have skipped lunch, but no, I've already failed it, so I'm just going to go.
I will
go all in.
Live to die another day, buddy. So first off, fasting only really applies to food. It doesn't apply to the internet. It doesn't apply to social media. It doesn't apply to any other thing. Those are all good things, but those are abstinence.
Yeah, those are
That's
abstaining.
not fasting. Fasting is food.
Yes.
So do you think there's more of a definition of what is food or not food? Because I'm going to take us on a tangent before we even get started. Because the first time I did it, I did actually have some chicken broth for lunch, but only chicken broth. So I drank it. So was that food?
I will tell you, my brother did a all liquid fast for like 3 or 4 weeks. And it was just protein shakes and broth. And I would say this. I would say that that is still very humbling. And so it's going back to that idea. I'm giving up something that I crave, something I desire,
Okay.
so that I can place myself fully into the, listening to the Lord. So yeah, I think that is still can be a fast. I think that there's nothing wrong with.
Okay. Because typically it's just water. I just drink water
Yeah,
for a day.
and that's fine too, But I have known of people that have done an all liquid fast for several weeks. They just have soup and they have protein shakes and that's it. And I still think the attitude is correct. I don't necessarily think that there's
That's not a cheat.
no, I don't think it's a cheat. I think that because I think
I kind of felt like it was a cheat.
no, I think if your heart's in the right place, that's okay. I mean, that's the intention. I'll be honest with you. A bowl of chicken broth is still going to make my stomach growl.
There was nothing there.
There's nutrients,
Yeah.
but there's no
calories there
there's
to
no-
speak of, that's for sure.
there's no filling.
Yeah.
You have to be filled by the Holy Spirit because it's not going to be from
Okay.
Chick-fil-A.
So we're not eating food. That's to start
That
with.
is definitely.
I would say
You also should abstain from cigarettes. He doesn't smoke. I'm kidding.
I would also say that take your time.
Yes.
Like work into this
skip one meal.
and work on a schedule. Figure it out. So there's a lot of different ways that people will do this. They will skip breakfast. So you got intermittent fasting, which you'll skip breakfast. So if you cut your protein or whatever intake off at 8 p.m. one night, then you're essentially your next meal is noon. So that's a 16-hour fast, which
Sure, you slept for
you
8 of
slept
it.
for half of it, but that's
There's nothing wrong with that.
Again, we're taking baby steps and building a muscle. It's just like building a muscle. There's no way that if you called me and said, "Dude, we're doing a 21-day fast starting today," it ain't happening. It's just not going to happen.
Really, to make 21 hours.
Yeah. So you got to, start slow, and I would also say, be gracious. Give yourself some grace, especially if, like me, this is a new thing. This is not something I've ever considered making a part of my life. So on a day like today, I kind of just laugh it off and go, "Well, I'll get you next time."
Right.
Because these are meant to be lifelong practices if you adopt them. So if I screw up one day, I mean,
Don't kick yourself while you're down.
right, because it's new. We don't really know what I'm doing. So I failed today. I'll get them next week.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Is that you have to allow yourself to have grace, but at the same time, you also have to, if you're going to make this a discipline, you don't just always go with, "Oh, it's grace again. I messed up,"
Right.
and "Oh, but it's grace again. I messed." At some point, you have to bite the bullet and say, "Okay, I'm going to do this."
Right, exactly.
I'm going to fast for 8 hours. I'm going to fast for 12 hours. I'm going to fast for 24, whatever it is. And here's my question then, I guess. Okay, so when you're fasting and the stomach growls, what is your plan of action?
Mostly it's what I described earlier. And I was gonna say in my next. Well, let's just move on to the next point. Have a purpose for your fast. So there's a physical only fast where all you really are trying to achieve are physical things, either weight loss or I don't know enough about the science to get into it, but there's a lot of
Neurological,
scientific
immune
proof that there's things that goes on in your body at about the 24-hour mark that could help your brain, help your body, I don't know, cure cancer, I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot of that stuff. I'm not qualified to speak to that, so I'm not going to. But to have a purpose for what you're doing does make it easier. So like I said earlier, my latest example is, every time I feel that pang, I take that person's situation into my head and my heart and I pray. And then I say to myself, this little suffering that I'm going through is temporary, and I can stop it at any time. This person cannot. So the least I can do is control this suffering for the next 4 or 5, 6 hours until my fast is declared complete. So fasting without a purpose is just dieting. So
Right.
so you got to have a purpose, and maybe that is a spiritual thing, or maybe it is relating to the suffering of others, or relating to the poor. There's many ways to do that, but we're going to have to take another break. Youth pastors. Where would we be without them, and where would they be without us? Love you, Ben. Where were we? Purpose,
Purpose, and you're talking about suffering.
Suffering.
So when you suffer, you are turning your eyes to that person's suffering, and lifting that to the Lord. So in prayer,
right?
I would like to really read that passage from Psalm 35, because I think it really speaks to this.
Okay.
Psalm 35, 13 and 14. But when they were sick, and this he's talking about his enemies, those that were trying to hurt him. When they were sick, I wore sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with head bowed on my chest. I went about as though I grieved for my friend or my brother. As anyone who laments his mother, I bowed down in mourning. So again, for him, he wanted to engage in their suffering by the only way that he could, without stabbing himself or whatever,
Right.
Without doing self-harm, is to fast and then lay that at the feet of the Lord.
Yeah.
And how beautiful is that? I mean, as a friend, when my friend says, I'm fasting for you in your time of need, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Because that's saying I'm willing to suffer to make sure that my prayers are heard, or to know that you don't walk this alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a major purpose of it, and it gets a little weird with that, right? Because Jesus is going to say in Matthew, when you fast, don't screw up your face, don't look like you're suffering, wash your clothes. It's kind of like
You hide the crazy.
do your hair, go to work, and just live your life, right? So we have to be real careful when we talk about that, not to talk about it for that kind of reason. So I'm always really weird about that. But, in the case, like you're discussing there, I mean, I feel like obviously it helps to tell that person that, hey, this is what I'm doing today, because I want you to know that I'm praying for you and that I'm doing whatever I can to share in your suffering, or whatever it is we're praying about.
We were talking about this in our men's study tonight. If we just say, I'm going to pray for you, how that feels versus let me pray with you right now. Well, then add in, not only am I praying for you, I'm also choosing to withhold food from my body and, for a time for you. There's a real powerful message that comes from that.
Especially if you know how much I like food.
You and I are in the same boat there. We are foodies. But there's a connection that's from that, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Some of the other things we need to talk about, like how to. It's like, don't try to overdo it. Make a schedule. So do 6 to 6, or do 8 to noon, or do this, so that you have a goal. So like if you're 6 hours into this thing or 10 hours into it, and you're just like, oh gosh, I got to go get something, you can look at that and go, like, I got 2 I can do this 2 more hours. I can do this bitch, like with this physique, I know I'm not dying of starvation over the next 2 hours. I can do this, right? And so having a schedule that you can stick to will help you realize over time, like, I have more control over this than I think I do.
Right.
Right. I say I'm doing Thursdays and Fridays. Fridays have been difficult for me because my Fridays have been very busy and slightly physically demanding, and so I have not fasted on Fridays as much as I would like, just because I've got to be available to carry sound equipment around and do all this sort of stuff. So you don't want to put yourself in danger. You don't want to overdo it. What are some other ways to do this?
Well, I would say one thing is make sure you drink enough water.
A lot of water.
Not only is it kind of like filling your stomach temporarily. I mean, I guess that's really the point, but you want to make sure that you don't get dehydrated in the process. Because we get a lot of our fluids from food.
Yeah.
And so you need to make sure for your mental health and focus and things like that you're drinking enough water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, I would say, again, the biggest part is when those hunger pains come, let those be a reminder to, okay, I'm lifting my eyes to the Lord. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking at my clock thinking, oh my goodness, it's 2.5 more hours. No, I have an opportunity to say, this is a reminder. Lord, I'm lifting this concern. I'm lifting this to you, whatever it may be, this decision, my friend that's mourning, whatever. I'm placing them in you. And then you go back doing it. And what happens, I think, is that you start to stop thinking about the growling, and you start thinking more about, what does God want for me?
Yep.
The focus begins to change.
Yep. Okay, let's do some don'ts.
Okay, well, I think the don'ts, I think we got to go with what Jesus said.
Yeah.
So Matthew 6:16 through 18, he says it very clearly. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites. I like how he immediately just calls them hypocrites. He knows exactly what he's talking about. For they disfigure their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. I'm so hungry.
So I'm not supposed to walk into work on Wednesday morning and say, nobody talk to me because I'm fasting and I'm going to be hangry all day. Leave me alone.
That would be how not to do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. So congratulations. You've now gotten your reward. You've gotten all the accolades.
All the sympathy
that you're going to get. Yeah. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. Mm. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you.
Wash your face, do your hair, go to work. That's what I was saying when the phone rang.
Yeah. Hide the crazy.
Hide the crazy and just go do your thing.
Yep. What was that?
Which can be tough because
Miranda Lambert song?
I do get hangry. Like I've had people give me Snickers and say, "Hey,
hey Betty White,
hey, eat this," and but I'll be honest with you, I started this in May. So it's the middle of June, so I'm about 6 weeks in. I haven't had a problem with hangry for the most part. I mean, truly,
the first few times, and then you've worked through it.
I mean, when you have a purpose to it, and when you have a plan for it, you have that mental game going, and so I'm not getting hangry. Now, I'm not going to tell you I don't have moments of it, and one of the other don'ts I'm going to say is don't make this a contest or a competition, or don't make it so serious that if you do slip up that it's a major blow up. It's just, well, crud, I ate, So don't get so wrapped up into the result or the goal that you forget there's a process.
Yep. Yes.
What?
I know. I feel so bad. I thought you were.
Oh no! Let's just leave it going.
Okay.
The world needs to hear what's going on.
I
Okay.
think it'd be all right if I left the trailer here.
Yeah.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
Really?
Hey.
You're going to interrupt us 2 times with questions like that. We love you.
I love you too.
Goober.
What did I say a minute ago? Youth pastors.
Can't live with him. You can't shoot him legally. Just kidding.
Oh, man.
I love him.
But we are going to a pretty
float tomorrow.
rural location. I mean, if something were to happen, something were to happen, we may not be able to control it. Just saying.
It's time for us to fast.
It's time for us to go home and get some sleep, I think. Any other don'ts? So don't don't make it obvious that you're doing this. Don't pretend to be suffering when you're really not.
Yeah, don't make it a competition with your buddy. Like, okay, who can fast the longest?
Right, or with yourself,
or even with yourself. I think, yeah, I'm gonna go in 5 minutes longer. I mean, that's not. If that's your intention, you're going about it for your own accolades again.
right.
And so the real point is that I'm doing this for the Lord. I'm doing this to humble myself before my Maker, before the Creator of the universe, the supreme being of all, and I'm not Him. So that's the purpose of fasting.
And what we should have said last week, we'll say it for this week too. And if we continue these conversations about the rest of these practices, we'll continue to say this too. Don't think that if you do this and you do it well, that makes you a better Christian than the people who
Yes.
don't. That's not what we're trying. That's also not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to separate ourselves from everybody else and feel better about ourselves and, oh, we're so much more spiritual or we're such a better Christian than anybody else. That's also not the goal.
And I see that happening with lots of, like, again, that's the Pharisee.
Right.
Well, look at me. I'm fasting and
I'm fasting and you're not.
I have
Which
the
probably
longest
right.
tassels on my robe, and and Jesus had some very strong words about that person. Whitewashed
yes.
tomb,
Yeah.
A viper. The viper would actually, as it gives birth, the little babies would burst out of the mom and kill the mom. He's basically saying you kill your own mom. That's a massive
something I would have said in junior high.
Yo, mama.
You killed your mama.
And
Anyway.
your mama would have beat you.
Yeah.
I know Mama Goodson.
Oh, you have no idea what kind of beatings she's capable of.
But yeah, there's definitely, make sure your attitude for this is correct.
Yeah.
With any of these, make sure your attitude is, I simply want to make sure I'm forming good practices so that I can make sure that my ears are open to the calling of the Lord, that I am in a place of peace, that I can receive messages, I can deal with stress, I can know and learn truth. So you've got to get rid of some of that distraction.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of spiritual disciplines.
Yeah. Don't put yourself in positions to make yourself miserable. Like, I'm not sure I would try to fast on a day that we're all planning to go to. Where's a good place to eat? I don't know.
McDonald's? Oh, no. Shit.
At Chili's and have some baby back ribs. So, yeah, don't sit at Chili's and smell baby back ribs and chips and salsa and tacos and steaks and sit there and drink your water and be miserable. Not a good plan also.
Yeah, there should be some strategic planning in that. If you're getting ready to go on vacation, and if you're like me, part of vacation is the places that you eat at,
You definitely got to do that.
probably shouldn't fast the whole time.
Yeah,
I'm just
probably
saying.
not.
Enjoy some of the local cuisine.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, God gave us good food because He delights in us.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with eating good food. There's nothing wrong with enjoying some finer things in life in moderation.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's probably about all the time we have for today.
go for
So-
Ben interrupts us again.
Yeah, he'll be back in a couple minutes. No, plus we have a float trip to prepare for.
That's not recording, is it? You see the green light now?
We ran out of time. Son
We're gonna go fast from podcasting. We're gonna abstain from podcasting after this. I'm the one that said pause it. But no, I didn't want to pause it.
He's the saint.
Sometimes he's the singer.
Bye, everybody.
Love you guys. You look like you're reloading. You're like,
I am.
you're about to have a stroke.
I'm trying not to.
My name is Sean Courtney. I'm the pastor at Connection Point Church, and I would like to offer you a big welcome to come join us on Sunday mornings for Sunday school at 9 o'clock. We have adult Sunday schools, we have children and youth Sunday school classes available. Then following that, we have worship where we will sing praises, pray for one another, and listen to Bible study. Encourage you, that starts at 10:15. We are at 700 Sycamore Street in Monette, Missouri. Also on Wednesday nights, we have more small groups following a meal that starts at 5:30. We have men's group, women's group, single moms, children, and youth. Encourage you guys to come and join us. We believe it's very important to be actively involved in the body of Christ because here, your family.